Hi everyone, today I'm going to cover El Salvador being the first country to ever recognize Bitcoin as legal tender. This is a huge moment. I've been in the space for 8 years, and I'm going to go through why this is important, why you should care, and a little bit of a background behind how this movement started. And before we begin, I want to give a shout out to Ledn. Ledn is a great place to lend or borrow against your Bitcoin. I personally use it. Definitely recommend it. Okay, let's jump on in. I write first on Thursdays about these different topics. It's in a newsletter called The Held Report. There's a link below to subscribe. Okay, so diving in here on what happened. On June 9th, El Salvador became the first country to recognize Bitcoin as legal tender. This is a huge, huge deal. And this all started from this little Bitcoin community on the beach called Bitcoin Beach, also known as El Zonte. It's a little tiny coastal town. There were different people involved with this. There's a couple different big Bitcoin benefactors. One of them was Jack Mallers. Jack did a phenomenal job at introducing Bitcoin and Lightning and to the different merchants and pulling in other people to help work on the project. So a huge, huge shout out to Jack on this. This was a really big deal. So this little tiny coastal town called El Zonte got into Bitcoin, which is super, super crazy because it's this tiny coastal town and you know, they're not really technologically advanced, but kind of like how the internet developed. The internet in some countries skipped over landlines and went straight to wireless. So just like cell phones, people didn't need to get their home connected with Ethernet. Bitcoin is kind of the same thing. Some of these countries don't have that traditional financial infrastructure, and so Bitcoin can kind of leapfrog that, and it's money that's been natively made for the internet. What was really cool to see is that the president of El Salvador not only embraced Bitcoin, pushing it as a recognized legal tender, but he's also leaning in on Bitcoin mining. So they get geothermal energy, so energy created by the heat of the earth from volcanoes. They're hoping to build Bitcoin miners that can harness this excess capacity that they're generating and utilize that to mine Bitcoin. So this country is fully leaning in and being a Bitcoin nation, where Bitcoin is a recognized legal tender. Bitcoin mining is embraced by the state. I think these are huge, huge moments for Bitcoin because it recognizes that countries will have to be competitive with Bitcoin. You either embrace it or Bitcoin will undermine your country over time. You have to be able to embrace it because your citizens are going to want it. Your citizens will store their value in it. And it's better to embrace Bitcoin than to try to fight it. And so, as I've been saying for years, some of you have been following me for a couple years. I've been in the space for almost 9 now. The next stage in adoption is when countries adopt it. So I've been in when no one believed in Bitcoin. It was just a small group of people. Then we had the institutions come in over the last 2 years. Institutions are the big banks, the hedge funds, the sovereign wealth funds. We're starting to see those come in. And so this is Bitcoin's adoption curve. And it was originally inspired by Murad. Murad is a really popular technical trader in the space. And so Bitcoin is about to become a store of value, recognized as a global store of value. And that's a really critical moment. And this is Bitcoin's price on the left. This is a very critical moment because Bitcoin has to go through these stages. It has to be globally recognized as a store of value before people want to spend it and price their items in it, the medium of exchange and unit of account era. But it wasn't going to happen in a binary function. We weren't just going to go store of value and then one day flip the switch and go to medium of exchange. There was going to be a moment when Bitcoin was both. And so what we're seeing now is that Bitcoin is going through this store of value era of being globally recognized by by hedge funds, other institutions, central banks as a global store of value, and eventually it's going to be called. And now we're seeing in El Zonte that's actually becoming a medium of exchange, which is kind of cool. Now, I don't think that's necessary for Bitcoin to win and survive. It's just interesting to see. Store of value, I think, is the much stronger use case for Bitcoin right now because Bitcoin is still very volatile. It's very volatile, which means that pricing items, unit of account, pricing items in Bitcoin would be really, really tricky. And this is a small victory, but it's actually a big victory in the longer term sense because it recognizes that Bitcoin is becoming increasingly legitimate and being recognized by institutions, even government institutions. That makes the retail traders, the common everyday traders like us or investors, we then believe in Bitcoin because of that. Before we continue, I want to give a shout out to my sponsor, CryptoTag. CryptoTag is the best way to store your Bitcoin backup. That backup is that 12 to 24 words that you generate when you generate your Bitcoin private key. This is a really cool tool. It's made out of titanium, crush-proof, waterproof, fireproof. It's what I use personally. It's a really, really awesome device, solid titanium here. I personally use it for all of my backups. This is something where if you're a Bitcoin hodler and you want to hodl for a long time, this will literally last a lifetime. So highly recommend it. And we'll go ahead and get back to the video. Cheers. What's interesting is that, what Satoshi was really trying to solve here with Bitcoin is solving the problem of trust. And I keep going back to this quote because it's so important to understand why Bitcoin was created. The root problem with conventional currency is all the trust that's required to make it work. The central bank must be trusted not to debase the currency, but fiat currencies is full of breaches of that trust. Banks must be trusted to hold their money and transfer it out electronically, but they lend it in credit bubbles with barely a fraction of reserve. This is from Satoshi. This is the first thing that he wrote after the white paper. The white paper, again, was kind of a marketing message to the cypherpunks, but what this represented was, I think, the grander kind of vision and what he really hoped to accomplish, what the problem Bitcoin was solving. And so Satoshi planted Bitcoin to solve this problem of trust with institutions. Now, naturally, they're not too receptive to becoming obsolete, and we've seen them push back. So since El Salvador adopted Bitcoin, the institutions, which a lot of them have embraced Bitcoin, but some of them are still stubbornly holding on to this old paradigm, this old fiat system, and they're not recognizing that Bitcoin could be legitimate. So there's some really silly stuff where, there's different folks. This economist says that adopting Bitcoin as legal tender could ruin El Salvador's economy. This economist says, well, yeah, economists are the least knowledgeable folks on the economy. As we've seen before, they're nearly 90% inaccurate in terms of predicting what's going to happen. If they were able to predict what would happen, they would be trillionaires because they would be able to predict what's going to happen in the markets, and every single hedge fund in the world would want to try to hire them. But of course, they're not. And so these economists are like pushing back against Bitcoin because they hate the idea that Bitcoin could be something. Same with Steve Henke. Steve is a notorious Bitcoin critic. He's hated Bitcoin since Bitcoin was $10. He's obviously been on the very wrong side of that trade. And other FUD as well. So what we call this is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The IMF. The IMF sees legal and economic issues with El Salvador's Bitcoin move. There's no legitimate reason why they should feel this way. They just don't like the idea that Bitcoin is becoming something legitimate and it's new and scary, and this is their initial reaction to it. But throughout human history, we constantly see this. So one of my favorite accounts is Pessimist Archive. I keep coming back to these guys. They're awesome. They're hilarious. They go back and find old newspaper clippings where they go in and they find this FUD around new technology. So here's the Walkman. The Walkman was like the first portable cassette player. And kind of like before the portable CD players and before portable MP3 players, kind of like our iPhone and iPod. And people, their immediate reaction is, let's ban it. Let's ban people from using it. It's weird. It's going to change society. Society is constantly changing. That is the constant of societies, that cultures will constantly change. New technology will be introduced, which will force us to kind of reevaluate how we all live and work together. Social media is a great new kind of foray into that, where it's a little bit moving faster than we're typically used to, whereas like the Walkman technology and other technologies typically took a little bit slower to be developed. Now with social media, things move at the speed of light. And so Pessimist Archive is a great place to go check out all this FUD around new technologies. And Bitcoin is a new money paradigm. And a lot of the worries that these central banks and these other folks who are still clinging onto this old system, a lot of their worries are rooted in irrationality. They just don't like new things. They refuse to believe that Bitcoin can be what it claims to be, this new sound money. And as we've seen, Bitcoin has, the value prop of Bitcoin hasn't changed since it was incepted. The world is just waking up to Bitcoin's value, though. And so I wanted to close this out with one quick little video of El Salvador's Bitcoin, kind of like what it looks like on the streets in El Zonte, and kind of a cool little look. I've never been to El Zonte before, but this is kind of a cool little look of what the beach life is like there. kind of like the little stores. And so there's over 500 families and merchants in El Zonte that use Bitcoin, primarily using Lightning because the fees are cheaper on layer 2 to kind of live in this Bitcoin economy. So really cool look at that. I think it's really neat to see, Bitcoin solve problems in these developing countries. Again, I think that Bitcoin's primary value prop is storing value rather than being a medium of exchange and unit of account. But if people want to use it that way, they're free to use it that way. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you enjoyed in the comments. Also throw me a like and subscribe. It really helps me out, helps me spread the message of Bitcoin. So appreciate you watching. Cheers. Bye. I want to give a shout out to my sponsor, CryptoTag. CryptoTag is the best way to store your Bitcoin backup. It's what I personally use. This is a solid plate of titanium, and you can etch on this plate your Bitcoin backup. That's the 12 to 24 word backup that you have for your Bitcoin wallet. This is the ultimate device. If you check out Jameson Lopp stress testing, this received one of the highest ratings. It's a great product, solid titanium. It's bulletproof, fireproof, waterproof, crush proof. If you want something that's going to last a lifetime, this is it.